In a small, bustling city, Lily stood at the entrance of the community center, her heart racing as she clutched her purse tightly. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue against the brick walls, but Lily felt no warmth. She had heard the whispers, the news spreading like wildfire. People were talking about a scandal, her scandal. And there she was, a figure of curiosity, avoiding eye contact as though it could somehow make her invisible. With each passing moment, she could sense the eyes of the passers-by on her, judging, speculating, their glances heavy with unspoken questions. Lily's thoughts were in chaos, swirling in her mind like autumn leaves caught in a fierce wind. Could she really face what was coming? Would she be able to address the truth, or would she crumble under the weight of their expectations? The door to the community center swung open and a group of children ran out, their laughter echoing in the air, blissfully unaware of the storm hovering just above. For a fleeting moment, Lily felt a pang of longing. She remembered a time when joy was simple and worry seemed distant, like clouds far away. Yet now she stood rooted to the spot, each second feeling like an eternity. A tight knot formed in her stomach as the sun dipped lower, warning her that time was running out. Then, without warning, the serene vibe shattered. A cluster of reporters, their cameras in tow, appeared at the foot of the stairs. Their voices buzzed with excitement, asking questions that pierced through the evening air like arrows. Lily, is it true? Suddenly, the ground felt unsteady beneath her feet. The whispers she had tried to ignore now roared in her ears. She took a deep breath, her chest tightening. Thoughts of denial flitted through her mind. Could she really just run away, escape the truth? But deep down, she knew it wouldn't work. Running away only hid her from herself. As the reporters surrounded the entrance, their notepads and cameras pointed at her like judging fingers, Lily was flooded with memories of what had brought her to this moment. It was less than a month ago when she had felt at the top of the world after launching her small business. She had always dreamed of this, of building something from scratch, but now everything felt like it was unraveling. The scandal had begun innocently enough, a small mistake she had made while trying to publish a newsletter for her business. Without her realizing it, an error had leaked, sending potentially damaging information flying across the town. It had been a simple mix-up. A computer glitch had sent out personal details of her clients, and in a town where everyone knew everyone, she became the topic of every conversation. Now, with the reporters closing in, she felt her heart slam against her ribcage. The weight of public scrutiny bore down on her soul like a heavy stone, pushing her deeper into a well of despair. With each flash of the camera, she could feel her confidence slipping like sand through her fingers. "Lily, please," shouted a reporter with determination in his voice, his recorder poised and waiting. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She thought of her family, her friends who had stood by her and supported her during the launch. They were counting on her even if the world was turning against her. The steady support she'd felt from those who truly mattered was suddenly a flicker of hope in her darkening reality. She took a deep breath, straightened her back, and finally made eye contact. It was just for a moment, but it felt powerful. In that brief exchange, she could see the curiosity and, yes, even the sympathy in their eyes. Maybe they wanted to understand her story, not just the headline. Maybe they were human too. Another voice broke through, a woman's voice now, softer yet just as insistent. The questions hit her like cold water, freezing her thoughts. Just then, the image of her clients flooded her mind. Sweet Mrs. Jenkins, who never forgot Lily's birthday, and the twins who adored coming to her workshops. What would they think of her now? A wave of shame washed over her, but alongside it was a spark of clarity. "I made a mistake," she finally said, her voice shaky but steady enough for the microphones to catch. There was a moment of silence, as though the world outside had paused to listen. Lily felt the weight of their gazes soften. The truth hung in the air, heavy and raw. What she didn't know was how they would react. That unpredictable beast known as public opinion could shift in a heartbeat. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she continued, drawing courage from deep within. "I truly care about my clients. Their trust means everything to me." As the words left her lips, a strange sense of relief washed over her, pushing back the tide of anxiety that had threatened to drown her. As rough as it was to face the reporters, this moment was hers to reclaim. The truth could break her or save her. In that moment, she chose the latter, asked a voice from the crowd. Lily replied, her strength growing, "I'm committed to correcting my mistake." With each passing moment, she could feel the tension between her and the reporters shift. Suddenly, this was less about scandal and more about redemption, a chance for her to prove who she was at her core. Her heart thudded in her chest, but now it was a rhythmic drum echoing strength rather than fear. The next question rang out, but it was different this time. Lily took a deep breath, searching for the right words. This was her moment to shine, to turn the narrative, and she was ready. "I've reached out to affected clients, and I'll be hosting a community meeting to address their concerns. I want to hear them, to learn from this, and to rebuild the trust that I've lost." The buzz of excitement among the reporters started to shift the atmosphere. This wasn't just a story of a scandal, it was evolving into a narrative of perseverance and hope. Suddenly, one reporter raised a hand, a shy expression on their face. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows in the street, the air felt lighter, charged with something new possibility. The cameras clicked less frequently now, their lens capturing something different. It was no longer just a story of shame, it was about a person stepping forward, ready to bare her soul. Lily spoke from her heart, the weight on her shoulders lifting as she shared her vision of reconnecting with the community. She envisioned art classes and workshops that would bring people together, build relationships, and most importantly, restore trust. The reporters, initially hungry for juicy details, found themselves captivated by her authenticity. She had transformed the situation into something bigger than herself. As the last of the questions came in, Lily smiled, a genuine smile that birthed from somewhere deep within. She felt visible, seen not just as a scandal or a mistake, but as a human being who was learning and growing. Finally, the reporters began to retreat, murmuring among themselves. The cameras lowered, the clicks faded, and slowly the crowd began to disperse. Lily stood there, heart pounding but filled with hope. The warmth of the evening returned like a comforting embrace. As she took a step back into the community center, she allowed herself a moment. The weight of their asks, their judgments, now seemed lighter, almost trivial in comparison to the fire of determination that burned inside her. Lily knew the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But she had faced the storm, the fear that threatened to consume her. And in doing so, she had found herself again, a woman ready to rise beyond her mistakes and reclaim her story one step at a time. The moment Lily stepped outside, she could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her. The sun was bright, glinting off the glassy storefronts lining the street, but all she felt was a darkness wrapping around her like a shroud. Just weeks earlier, she had walked these streets filled with confidence and hope, but today the ground seemed to shift with each step. She avoided eye contact, glancing down at her shoes as if they held the answers to her turmoil. Just outside the community center, where she had poured her heart and soul into building a safe space for creativity, she could hear murmurs rising from small clusters of people. It was unavoidable. The news traveled fast, like wildfire in a parched forest. A mistake. One single error and the whispers had morphed into a scandal. Lily had sent out an email that would change everything. Instead of reaching only her loyal clients, it had gone out to an entire mailing list, not just clients, but also friends, neighbors, the whole town. Personal details revealed, a breach of trust that felt like a gut punch. Now she stood here, vulnerable and exposed, the very thing she had worked to create threatened by a simple twist of fate. As she hesitated at the entrance, the air shifted. She could sense the eyes of the townsfolk on her, their curiosity and judgment palpable. They wanted to see the woman who had made a mistake, the shadow of her former self. The whispers hung in the air, and Lily fought against the urge to run away, to hide from the collective gaze of the town. But she knew she couldn't do that, and then it happened. Reporters materialized out of nowhere, closing in around the entrance, cameras clicking as they aimed at her like a pack of hungry wolves. Their bright lights felt harsh against her skin. Every blink of the camera seemed to capture not just her likeness, but the broken pieces of her pride laying scattered on the ground. She tried to steady her breath, to find her balance, but anxiety clawed at her chest. "Lily," shouted a reporter, waving a microphone that felt like a baton meant to parade her shame. At that moment, the world fell silent. Everyone leaned in. Lily took a step back, her mind screaming at her to flee, but instead she stood rooted to the spot, choosing or perhaps trapping herself in an inescapable reality. It was too late to turn back now. She could feel the prick of tears rising, threatening to spill, but she swallowed hard. Her heart didn't just race, it thudded like a drum, each beat echoing in her ears. The energy of the crowd shifted, their curiosity blending with a hint of compassion. Even they, amid the spectacle, could feel the weight of the moment. Caught off guard by the bluntness of the question, her stomach dropped. It was blunt, but honestly it was fair. She had let them down. "Yes, I made a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. The words felt like stones, heavy on her tongue. Mistake, such a small word, but packed with colossal consequences. She remembered the excited emails she had sent, the dreams she had spun about uniting people through art and creativity, and now here she was on the verge of losing everything. Another reporter pressed, probing her vulnerability with a sharp edge. What could she say? How could she fix this? She loved her clients. They were more than customers. They were friends, partners in a vision she had nurtured since she was a little girl. Each name on that list represented a relationship, a story, a shared moment. What if she had ruined it all? "I want to make amends," she finally stammered. "I'll reach out to each person affected." For a split second, a spark of strength surged within her. Maybe it was the reality of standing before the crowd, admitting her shortcomings. The vulnerability felt terrifying, but oddly empowering. But as quickly as it came, doubt began to creep back in. What if the community rejected her? What if one slip of a finger meant a lifetime of scorn? She imagined the disappointed expressions, the shaking heads, people pointing fingers. The crowd shifted, murmurs rippling through the throng. It was a dangerous mix of sympathy and skepticism. They were waiting for more. They wanted a good story, a scandal with teeth. Flashes of her old self flooded her memory. The The little girl who had painted her dreams onto canvases in her backyard, the teenager who had held onto her paintbrush like a lifeline. She felt that girl, that dreamer deep within, urging her on. "I believe in creating spaces where people feel safe and accepted. I never wanted to hurt anyone," she declared, her voice rising above the din. "I want to learn from this and become better." The response was electric. The reporters hesitated, their eyes flickering as they processed her words. This wasn't just a story, it was a testimony, a person standing tall amidst the rubble. A reporter asked, curiosity blending with surprise. "Not at all," she replied, her voice steady now. "I will keep pushing forward, I will rebuild, and I will make it even better than it was before." There it was, the boldness she thought was long gone. With every word, the fear began to melt away. She had a right to her story, to reclaim what she had lost. There was power in owning her mistake, power in choosing to face it rather than hiding. As she spoke, she noticed the crowd shifting again. The initial skepticism was giving way to hope, and suddenly reporters were scribbling notes not just of the controversy but of the possibility for redemption. Someone shouted, anticipation hanging thick in the air. "Yes, I will," she responded, and in that moment the fear felt lighter. "I will personally reach out to each of them, apologize for my mistake, and show them how serious I am about making things right." Time seemed to slow as her words hung in the air. The crowd, the buzzing reporters, they were transformed from a symbol of her shame into a chorus of tentative allies, curious about her journey, hopeful for her future. As the last question was asked and answered, the reporters started to shift away, allowing Lily some space. She stood there, heart still pounding, but with a new sense of control. The worries had not vanished entirely, but she felt more equipped to face the torrent. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of her story. Once the cameras lowered, the glimmer of the sunset painted the sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple. The day had been long, filled with fear and uncertainty, but as she stood there, a mix of determination and vulnerability surged within her, a reminder of why she had fought to build this business, this community. As the crowd began to disperse, there was a lingering warmth among those who had gathered. Some threw her words back to her, direct and kind. With each supportive comment, a flicker of hope rekindled inside her. She started to believe in herself again. Lily knew she was stepping into uncharted waters, but this time she wouldn't navigate it alone. The community she had built would rally behind her and they would rise together. Lily turned away from the entrance, back toward the common space that had once felt like a sanctuary. It was the heart of her dreams and now a symbol of her resolve. She walked forward, the shadows of doubt lingering behind her like echoes of the past, but with every step she felt lighter. With each stride, she embraced the moments that would come next, the outreach to her clients, the meetings filled with apologies and understanding. She looked ahead, envisioning the brighter days that would surely return, the laughter and creativity flowing once again through the walls she had built. As she stepped into the warm glow of the community center, the reality of her journey unfolded before her. The crowd might have surrounded her, but they had witnessed not just her mistake, but her resilience. And in that she found not only her voice, but also a community determined to embrace her one connection, one story at a time. She was ready to reclaim her narrative. This was not the end, but the start of something powerful. The moment Lily walked through the doors of the community center, she felt the weight of thousands of eyes on her. Just days before, she had been a local hero, the proud owner of a thriving art center. Now, she was nothing more than a scandal waiting to unfold. The crowd outside buzzed like a hive of angry bees, journalists whispering harsh truths, their cameras poised and ready, waiting for her to make a move. Lily paused, taking in the sight of the reporters flanking the entrance. They had gathered with notepads, cameras, and microphones, creating an unyielding wall of scrutiny. The sunlight bounced off the lenses, casting bright reflections that stung her eyes, but worse than the light was the anxiety that spiraled in her chest. How had it come to this? Just a week ago, she had been in the middle of planning art workshops, her passion radiating throughout the space. Every brush stroke she taught was a step toward building a dream, a community, a safe haven for creativity. But an error, a simple technical glitch, had transformed her life into a gripping headline. It leaked her clients' private information, and what had been a joyful endeavor had soured into accusations and betrayal. She had tried to avoid eye contact as she stepped outside, but there was no escaping the truth. No matter how hard she willed herself to be invisible, the throng was eager and relentless. There was a certain psychology at play. The desire to witness a fall from grace could make even the most casual bystander feel giddy. They craved a story, and she was the headline. "Lily," shouted a reporter, the sound cleaving through the tension like a knife. She flinched, hesitating just a few feet from the entrance. Her breath caught in her throat. Just then, another voice pierced through the hum of anticipation. "What do you have to say about the breach?" Every word felt like another weight stacked on her shoulders. The question rattled through her, and she suddenly found herself teetering on the edge of panic. The hand she shielded her eyes with trembled ever so slightly as she fought against the urge to flee. But running away wouldn't solve anything. Avoiding the truth wouldn't make it disappear. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the countless times she had stood in front of her students, encouraging them to push through their fears. Deep down, she felt a flicker of the fiery determination she once had. This was her moment to confront not just them, but also herself. "I'm taking full responsibility for my actions," she eventually said, her voice shaky but rising with newfound strength. "What happened was an accident, and I understand that trust has been broken." Lily could see the confusion mixed with intrigue wash over the faces before her. The reporters shifted, their pens poised to scribble down what they hoped would lead to a captivating story. But she had no intention of becoming the tragic figure they'd painted her to be. Lily. Another voice called, slicing through the crowd as if it were a rubber band stretched too tight. "No, I haven't yet," she admitted, her honesty an attempt to distinguish herself from the sensationalism buzzing around her. "But I will." Hope sparked in her chest. With each sentence, she felt the weight of her fear lift, if only slightly. This was no longer just about avoiding eye contact or stepping back into the shadows. This was about standing her ground and reclaiming her story. But the reporters had more questions, relentless in their pursuit of a story that would sell. "Do you think your business can survive this?" Their words stirred something deep inside her, and she pushed her shoulders back, refusing to yield to panic. Every business faces challenges, especially when you put yourself out there. What matters is how you respond, how you choose to grow. I want my clients to see that I'm committed to making amends. In that moment, Lily caught a glimpse of the woman she had fought so hard to become. It was liberating to speak her truth, even as the cameras focused intently on her face, capturing every shift of emotion. The raw honesty cut through the fabricated chaos of her situation, a moment of authenticity in a world hungry for gossip. Asked a reporter, their curiosity revealing no hint of sentiment. As she sighed, accepting the weight of the question. As she spoke, she could feel the tension in the air lift. For the first time, the crowd didn't seem like a gathering of vultures hovering over her. They seemed more like witnesses to something significant, something real. The question threw her momentarily. Could she? The flicker of doubt could have easily dimmed her resolve, but there it was again, her nurturing voice rising within her. "The road ahead will be difficult," she conceded, familiar warmth filling her chest. "But trust is built on honesty, and I intend to be transparent in every step I take. I have to earn it back." Cheers erupted from the crowd unexpectedly, mingling with her heartbeat, a reminder that even in the harshest moments, people were willing to lend their support. She hadn't expected the palpable warmth from her neighbors, their resonance a sign that hope could thrive even amid despair. But with the cheers came nervous laughter, a sentiment that didn't escape the reporter's ears either. The air shifted, the narrative was changing. Tightening her jaw, she stood taller, certain in her resolve. A voice called out. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "I'll be hosting a community meeting next week. I want to invite everyone affected. I want to hear their stories, answer their questions." With every response, she felt another brick fall away from the wall of anxiety that had held her captive. The certainty and clarity washed over her, growing stronger as she spoke. Lily realized she was no longer just standing in front of her accused self. She was standing with purpose. "Lily, one last thing," the reporter spoke again, the urgency in the voice almost palpable. "I'm very aware," she said, the confidence in her tone rising like the sun on a new day. "But reputations can be rebuilt." The harshness of the harsh lights and the camera clicks faded into the background. In that moment, Lily felt a sense of peace, as if the answers she was giving weren't just for the audience but were affirmations for herself. She was ready to face the consequences of her mistake with courage, to step forward and own her narrative. With the reporters slowly dispersing, Lily stood strong in the light of the setting sun, where shadows began to stretch, but her resolve remained bright. Instead of collapsing into despair, she felt revitalized, holding onto the flicker of hope that had grown in the tumultuous heart of fear. As she turned toward the entrance of the community center, she felt the embrace of the familiar walls, the remnants of laughter and artistry etched within. This place was hers, and she wouldn't let one mistake tear it down. Lily stepped inside and was met with silence. It enveloped her like a warm hug. The moment felt sacred, a turning point where she could concoct her plans of restoration. She envisioned the community meeting, the discussions that would bring them together. She thought of the clients who had put their trust in her, their familiar faces and stories that colored her memories. What they hadn't seen was the years spent building every connection, the love infused in each brush stroke of her workshop. She knew she didn't have to justify her passion to anyone, but she hoped to reignite that same flame in all of them. Determined, she pulled out her notebook, pen trembling slightly but holding steady. She scribbled down names, ideas, ways she could reach out to everyone affected. Each line was a reminder that there was work to be done, a narrative waiting to unfold, and a community eager to grow alongside her. Life can throw you into moments of crisis, but it can also gift you resilience. Lily suddenly understood that this was not the end of her story. Rather, it was the beginning of something revolutionary. It was a chance for reinvention crafted through authenticity and trust. Stepping through the doors again, she let the world see her. No more avoiding eye contact, no more hiding. Instead, she stepped into the light, ready to face the challenges ahead with boldness and grace. With each passing moment, she shed a weight that had threatened to hold her down, embracing not only her mistakes but also the incredible potential of new beginnings. As night fell, the first stars emerged, twinkling brightly overhead. They were like the whispers of encouragement she could finally embrace, guiding her forward into the unknown, the journey of healing together, one step at a time. She was ready, and this time she wouldn't turn away. The moment Lily stepped outside the cool, concrete walls of the community center, an uncomfortable feeling rolled over her like a wave. Just a week ago, she had been the celebrated founder of a vibrant art space, a haven for creativity. Now she was the subject of a scandal that had turned her life upside down. People gathered around, their eyes glued to her with a mix of curiosity and judgment, almost tangible in the air. Whispers echoed in the cool breeze as she shifted on her feet, her palms sweaty against the hard grip of her purse. She could feel their gaze, each glance a pressure that bore down on her. Meeting their eyes felt like a risk she wasn't ready to take. The sun split the sky into a brilliant orange hue, but there was no warmth to be found in that moment. Instead, dread sank deeper into her chest. Just days before, Lily had been awash in the excitement of new workshops set to launch, her community drawing closer together through art and collaboration. But one simple mistake, a technical error in an email, had unleashed a storm she never saw coming. In her effort to reach customers, the email had mistakenly sent sensitive information to everyone but her regular clients. The news had spread like wildfire, and soon she was facing the heartbreak of those who felt betrayed, their trust shattered like a fragile vase hitting the ground. Lily, a reporter, shouted, the incessant clicks of their cameras invading her fragile bubble. For a second, she thought about retreating back inside, to the familiar haven of vibrant colors and paint-stained floors. But the weight of that choice anchored her firmly to the spot. She took a shaky breath, forcing herself to stand tall against the crowd. Maybe if she didn't make eye contact, she could slip into the shadows, but deep down, she knew avoiding them wasn't an option. Lily, another voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. What could she say? The truth was plain and simple. She had made a mistake, but the words felt like stones in her throat. Every heartbeat echoed with their expectations, and she was terrified that one stumble could send everything crashing down. With every ounce of courage she could muster, she finally spoke. I want to apologize to everyone affected. Silence overtook the crowd for a moment. She could see some reporters leaning in, intrigued by the raw emotion creeping into her words. Maybe they could sense the shame she wore like a heavy coat. A different reporter probed the question, sharp and piercing. Lily felt herself flinch at the question. Wasn't that the question haunting anyone thrust into the public eye? She shook her head, her voice steadying. Absolutely not. In that instant, the air shifted. She felt a spark of something igniting within her, a rush of confidence. People might see her as a scandal, but beneath it all was a woman with a passion that had fueled countless dreams. A passion she wasn't ready to give up. A reporter asked, scribbling notes as they leaned forward, eager for details. I plan to hold a community meeting, she replied, feeling the fire in her words. I want to address everyone's concerns face to face. As she spoke, she could see the thread of curiosity catch on the reports. Maybe they didn't want just sensationalism. They wanted a glimpse behind the curtain of the woman confronting her faults. There's something universally appealing about resilience, after all. Another voice chimed in, the urgency palpable. Yes, she said firmly, the words flowing out like water. I will call every single person affected. Lily could feel the crowd shift, sensing her unwavering resolve. In standing there, owning her mistakes, she was stepping into a new identity, one that came with shadows, but also with the promise of growth. The cameras continued to flash, capturing the moment like a story unfolding on the screen. She wasn't just a pariah, she was a person ready to fight for redemption. A lingering question made her pause once again. The question struck a nerve. Could her dream survive? There was a brief moment of doubt, fear bubbling up inside her like a storm ready to break. But then she remembered the faces of the people who believed in her, the familiar smile of Mrs. Jenkins, the unconditional support of her closest friends. That flicker of vulnerability transformed into a wave of strength. I believe my business can survive this because it was never just about me, she answered passionately. It's about the community we've built together. As she spoke, Lily felt the knot of anxiety loosen a bit in her chest. The murmurs around her transformed from harsh judgments into curious conversations. The journalists, rather than vicious hunters ready to pounce, were increasingly captivated by her honesty. These were not just questions driven by scandal, they were connecting with her story too. Someone shouted from the back, "Yes, I am," she responded, her voice unwavering. Her chest swelled with a sense of purpose. Perhaps there was something to be said about facing the storm head-on, something she would have never considered just days ago. Standing before them, she realized how powerful vulnerability could be, not as a sign of weakness, but as a catalyst for change. Their questions kept coming, but the tension shifted. Each declaration felt less like a confession and more like a rallying cry. In the heat of that moment, her fear began to dissolve and clarity emerged. Lily was not merely defending herself, she was proclaiming her commitment to something greater. With the reporters slowly transitioning to more heartfelt questions, she sensed a newfound solidarity beginning to form. A voice called out, their sincerity caught her off guard, yet within the chaos she found warmth, support, and the promise of resilience. "I need everyone's ideas," she called back, trying to captivate every ear. "Let's make this a collective effort." In that instance of connection, she felt alive. The crowd turned from a sea of cameras and microphones into a network of allies seeking to rally behind her, an echo of their shared humanity. Who would have thought that facing her mistakes would spark something so powerful? As more questions filled the air, disappointment lingered in the faces of those who thrived on drama, hoping for a scandalous headline. But for everyone else, the energy shifted once again, bringing hope into the mix. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. This was about turning a moment of weakness into a lesson learned, about growing together. "I want to apologize to earn back what was lost. I will do all I can," she reiterated, the passion in her words now unwavering. Asked a wary journalist, "Forgiveness is a journey," she replied carefully. "I may not know what it looks like exactly, but I'm willing to walk that path." As the last of the questions began to taper off, Lily stood standing amid fading sunlight, no longer feeling the sharp edges of anxiety gnawing at her. Instead, she felt a comforting warmth, the aura of possibility wrapping around her like an embrace. The crowd began to disperse, leaving her standing at the entrance, still pulling in deep breaths of fresh air. She felt like a phoenix on the verge of rising from the ashes, ready to embrace a new dawn, her dreams momentarily obscured but not erased. As she turned to step back inside, the noise dimmed, and she found solace in the familiar surroundings of art supplies, sketches, and colors waiting to burst to life. She could visualize the future meetings, the vibrant dialogues with her clients, and that exhilarating feeling of collaborating again. With each step into the community center, she decided to reclaim her space, not just as a business owner, but as a woman willing to grow, to learn, and to embrace her mistakes. It was time to turn the tide, armed with the realization that vulnerability could indeed forge stronger connections. What had begun as a scandal had birthed an opportunity, a chance to demonstrate authenticity and change. Through the fear, uncertainty, and raw emotion, she was ready to step into a new version of herself, one crafted through resilience and empathy. And above all, she would no longer shy away. Lily would approach every challenge head-on, her spirit ignited, fueled by the unwavering belief that even in the face of adversity, she could emerge stronger. It wouldn't be an easy road, but she was ready for the journey. She wasn't just looking to fix a mistake. She was looking to redefine what it meant to connect, to trust, and to grow together through every shade of life. As she opened that door, it was a new chapter waiting to be written, one where mistakes held education instead of shame, where community rallied together rather than turning away. She was ready to lead the way, heart open, eyes steady, embracing the beauty of what life could become. The doors swung open with a creak, and Lily stepped into the blinding sunlight, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. She could sense the crowd waiting just outside, buzzing with excitement and a hint of malice. People were whispering, their eyes flickering in her direction like moths drawn to a flame. In that moment, she wished she could disappear. Just a week ago, the community center had been her sanctuary, a place where creativity blossomed and friendships flourished. But now, the air felt thick with tension. She had become a figure of gossip and scrutiny after a massive blunder had sent shockwaves through her beloved art community. An email intended for a small group had accidentally gone out to everyone. Sensitive client information, personal stories, shared secrets thrown into the public sphere like confetti in a storm. As she approached the entrance, her heart raced. The vibrant sunset seemed to mock her, casting everything in a twisted glow. She avoided eye contact, focusing instead on the pavement beneath her feet. What would she even say? Could she find the right words to face the accusation that had left her breathless? "Lily," shouted a reporter, breaking the weighty silence. The voice cut through her thoughts, sharp and demanding. She froze, heart pounding like a drum. It felt as if the world had come to a standstill just for her. There was no escaping it. She had to confront what was coming, however painful it might be. "Lily," another voice called. Suddenly the energy shifted. The reporters were closing in around the entrance, their cameras flashing like a barrage of fireworks. Each click felt like a reminder of her failure, a flash of light illuminating the darkest corners of her heart. She took a shaky breath, making herself remember the words of her mentor. In the worst of moments, be fully present. Someone shouted again, their tone urging her to respond. "I am doing my best to fix this," she finally managed to say, her voice trembling but resolute. She forced herself to look up, meeting the gaze of one reporter in the front. In his eyes, she saw a flicker of empathy. Maybe, just maybe, they wanted to understand her story and not just headline it. He pressed, notebook poised as he jotted down her words. Her mind spun, every answer swirling like the wind. "I want to host a community meeting," she said, her tone gaining strength. The crowd shifted, a sea of faces reflecting curiosity instead of scorn. The harshness in their expressions began to soften. Could it be? Were they genuinely interested in listening? A wave of hope surged within her, casting aside the shame that had threatened to drown her. Someone called from the back, their voice steady but demanding. Yes, she replied, the words spilling forth with newfound confidence. I know accountability comes with consequences. I'm ready to face them. I plan to reach out to everyone impacted and personally apologize. The reporters leaned in, captivated by her honesty, their questions shifting from accusations to a deeper exploration of her plans. Slowly but surely, she was building her narrative, shaping it in her hands rather than letting it slip away. This was not simply a moment to be salvaged, it was her opportunity to rise, to prove that even in the face of adversity, she could stand tall. Another voice interjected, filled with skepticism. Lily hesitated, the question striking a chord deep within. Could it? She quickly pictured the art classes, the laughter, and the relationships she had built. I believe it can, she said firmly. The community we've created is stronger than one mistake. The energy in the air shifted once more. A ripple of understanding passed through the crowd, fueled by stories of forgiveness and resilience. She was no longer just a victim of circumstance, she became a symbol of hope. The vulnerability that had once clawed at her heart now wrapped around her like armor. Someone shouted, urgency lacing their voice. She took a deep breath, steadying her resolve. I'm so sorry. Words can't change what's happened, but I want them to know that I am deeply committed to making things right. With each response, she could feel the tension in her chest ebbing away. The media frenzy that had overwhelmed her began to feel less like a storm and more like a platform, an opportunity to show the world who she truly was. By standing in front of them, unmasking her vulnerability, she created a bridge back to her community. What's your next step, Lily? Another reporter pressed. Yes, I am, she declared, her voice unwavering. I may have fallen, but this is not the end. A murmur rippled through the crowd, some expressions still cautious, others brightening with newfound hope. Maybe they could feel it too, the palpable energy shifting around her. She had stepped from the shadow of embarrassment into a space of resilience. This wasn't merely about salvaging her reputation, it was about so much more. With every question, she took another step forward. I want to create an open dialogue, she said, her voice echoing in the stillness. I want to hear from everyone, not just their concerns, but their ideas. For a moment, she stood in the light, feeling the warmth of support radiating around her. As the reporters began to lower their cameras, she could almost hear the gears of understanding turning in their minds. They weren't just reporting a story, they were witnessing a journey. By the time the last questions were asked, the crowd had transformed. The earlier tension faded, replaced with a sense of cautious optimism. Lily stood at the entrance, once again feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. What had begun as a nightmare was turning into a catalyst for change. As she turned to walk back into the community center, her heart swelled. The familiar space was filled with art and laughter, the purpose of her dreams still alive within the walls. It was time to reclaim her narrative and turn the whispers of doubt into a chorus of hope. Lily opened her notebook, letting ink flow freely across its pages as she began jotting down everything she would need to do, tasks, ideas, and ways to connect with her community. Each word was a step toward redemption, a promise to herself and everyone who believed in her. Emotions swirled in the air as she absorbed the transformation. She smiled, realizing that vulnerability could lead to strength, that honesty could create bonds stronger than secrecy. The door that had felt so heavy at first now swung open with the thrill of new possibilities. The next days blended into a whirlwind of plans, calls, and emails. Lily reached out to her clients, engaging them with compassion and clarity. She hosted the community meeting where not only her clients but also friends and neighbors arrived with open hearts, ready to share their thoughts, their concerns, and their hopes. Each conversation was difficult but cathartic. The walls of misunderstanding began to crumble, and Lily shared her vision for the future, emphasizing a collaborative approach going forward. They mapped out classes that would enrich the community even further, creating a space for healing and creativity to flourish. As time passed, she could feel the trust slowly returning. One by one, her clients expressed their willingness to move forward, to embrace the imperfections in their journey together. Every exchange was a brick laid down on the path of rebuilding, their hearts stitching together scars of betrayal with threads of understanding. Months had passed since that fateful day, and although the memory of the chaos still lingered, every moment had led her back to the very essence of her passion. She poured love into every workshop, filled the walls with laughter, and invited creativity to dance once more. Lily transformed her art center into a sanctuary of expression, proving to herself and everyone around her that mistakes could lead to growth. She learned to embrace the messiness of life, to see within the cracks a beauty she never expected. She faced every challenge with strength, knowing the community was right there alongside her. As the sun set over the community center, casting golden light through the windows, Lily took a moment to breathe it all in. The echoes of laughter and creativity filled the air. She felt a glimmer of gratitude deep within, realizing that the day she had avoided eye contact was also the day that had changed everything. That moment had forged her into the leader she had always aspired to be, a figure not just defined by her mistakes, but one who stepped boldly into the spotlight to reclaim her power. She didn't just survive the storm, she found a way to dance in the rain. With each passing day, Lily chose to show up, eyes wide open, heart full, ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that the journey to rebuilding trust and community would forever be a part of her story. And in that story, she found her voice, stronger than ever, resonating with hope, resilience, and an unyielding spirit. The moment Lily stepped outside, she could feel the air thrum with tension, thick enough to cut. Just a week prior, she had walked into the community center with her head held high, bathed in the warm glow of a new venture. An art space she had poured her soul into was finally thriving, each brushstroke and laughter of her clients echoing off the walls she loved. But now, it felt like the world had turned its back on her, leaving her exposed and vulnerable just beyond those doors. Avoiding eye contact was her immediate instinct, yet the weathered brick of the entrance was no shelter from the crowd gathering outside. Voices buzzed with curiosity and judgment, mingling like smoke signals rising ominously in the distance. The recent scandal had unfolded rapidly, a technical error in an email. Information that should have remained private had slipped into the public domain, ripping apart the trust she had worked tirelessly to build. People moved in and out of her peripheral vision, their faces painted with a mix of concern and cruel delight. She could see a few reporters in the mix, their cameras ready, lenses glinting under the sun, capturing every awkward shift and sigh. She had always been the facilitator of creativity, the joyful curator of connection, but here she stood, a target. Then came the shouts piercing the veil of her thoughts. "Lily," one reporter called out, pushing through the crowd like a player on a mission in a game. Time slowed as she took a shaky breath. There was no running from this. They weren't just spectators, they were reporters hungry for a story, her story. The fear that clawed at her stomach made her wish she could melt away, disappear into nothingness. But deep down, she knew she had to face them. She had to stand her ground even as shame washed over her like a cold wave. "Lily," another voice rang out, biting and urgent. She clenched her fists, took another breath, and forced the words out, feeling the adrenaline rush through her veins. The words came out shaky, but they hung in the air nonetheless, undeniable and raw. As she looked up, briefly meeting the gaze of one reporter, she felt a flicker of empathy reflected back at her. Maybe, just maybe, they were interested in more than just scandal and headlines. Perhaps they wanted to understand her, to grasp the complexity of the situation, a person with hopes, dreams, and now a monumental mistake. Someone shouted from the back, the question sharp, filled with anticipation. Shaking her head, Lily felt a surge of defiance. "No, I will not resign. I owe it to my community to make things right." The response was electric. For a moment she felt the room shift. The buzz of skepticism gave way to a current of intrigue. The crowd was no longer just there to witness her downfall. They were becoming, perhaps, active participants in her journey to redemption. A different reporter asked, leaning in closer, eyes wide with curiosity. "I will hold a community meeting," she declared, each word steadying her resolve. "I need to speak to everyone affected, to listen to their concerns, and to build a path forward together." At that moment, she wasn't simply talking about her actions, she was unveiling her soul. Vulnerability and strength had begun to intertwine, and every sentence she spoke took her one step further away from the shame that had once threatened to engulf her. Another voice chimed in, laced with doubt. She considered the question. For a fleeting moment, insecurities crept back in, whispering that perhaps she wouldn't make it. But then she remembered why she started this journey, why she had opened her heart and put everything on the line. "Yes," she replied, her voice growing stronger. "I believe it can because my community believes in it." The crowd began to shift, their energies mirroring her own. She could see the curiosity transform into softening expressions, recognition dawning that she was more than just a figure of shame. Here she was, a human being willing to embrace the chaos and learn from it. A voice asked, its tone gentler this time. "Yes," she answered firmly. "I'm ready to be held accountable and to do the hard work necessary to rebuild trust." For the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope flickering deep within her. The air was still charged, but it no longer felt stifling. Questions continued to come, but they shifted, becoming less about blame and more about understanding. She was no longer just defending herself, she was laying the foundation for the narrative to unfold. A journalist asked, their eyes earnest and searching. A tremor ran through her, but she steadied herself. "I will apologize," she said, the emotion breaking through her facade. "I want everyone affected to know how deeply regretful I am." The questions slowed and the crowd began to settle into a space of contemplation. She felt their energy shifting, moving from scrutiny to understanding. In her willingness to be real, to show her vulnerability, she was creating a ripple effect. As the last echoes of questions faded, a realization washed over her. She stood on the brink not just of redemption, but of transformation. The weight of previous shame began to dissolve, replaced with determination. Standing before them, she wasn't just a woman plagued by guilt, she was an embodiment of resilience. "Thank you for your time," Lily finally said, feeling the strength in her voice. The crowd began to disperse, voices softening, but she could feel their curiosity lingering. And for the first time since this storm began, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She could breathe again. As she stepped back inside the community center, her sanctuary, the walls felt alive with possibility. She walked through the familiar space, imagining the laughter of her clients and the joy of collaboration. There, amid the paints, canvases, and half-finished projects, was the heartbeat of the community she cherished. Lily opened her notebook, ink flowing freely as she began jotting down ideas for her outreach. Each word transformed into a step toward healing, not just for herself, but for everyone who had believed in her vision. The journey wouldn't be easy, but she felt steadfast in her purpose. Days turned into weeks, each moment building upon the last. Lily reached out to her clients, each conversation filled with honesty and sincerity. She wanted to show them that she was committed to transparency, even about her flaws. The community meeting that followed became a space of catharsis, allowing everyone to voice their thoughts, concerns, and feelings. The stories shared during that meeting became the threads weaving them back together. With every apology she gave, every promise she kept, trust began to rekindle. Slowly, the air lightened, filled with the colors of hope and unity rather than judgment. Each interaction reinforced her belief that although mistakes had been made, they did not define her. As the days turned into months, the community grew stronger than ever. Workshops flourished and laughter filled the air once again. The business evolved into a safe haven where creativity could thrive. Lily's heart swelled with pride as she watched her clients embrace vulnerability, turning their own struggles into art. In the backdrop of all this change, the memory of that fateful day remained, a bittersweet reminder of what had been lost and, more importantly, what had been found. It served as a compass, guiding her toward deeper connections and a clearer understanding of community. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting golden rays through the windows, Lily stood among her clients, absorbing the shared energy that pulsed through the room. The laughter, the creativity, it felt like home. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. Was it irony or fate that had led her from the brink of despair to the vibrant sanctuary now before her? She couldn't say for sure, but she knew one thing. She had conquered the fear that once threatened to consume her and replaced it with resilient hope. Now, as she stood surrounded by her community, she recognized the beautiful lessons born from chaos. The journey hadn't come without its pain, but it had been worth every moment. She was no longer just defined by her mistake, but by the courage she had shown to confront it, learn from it, and rebuild stronger. With eyes wide open and heart full, Lily stepped forward into the future, ready to embrace whatever came next. No more avoiding gaze or shying away from responsibility. The world may have brought challenges, but she would face them with boldness and grace, because ultimately it was not the fall that defined her, it was the rise that followed. Lily stood at the threshold of the community center, her heart pounding like a drum. Just days ago, she had been celebrated for her passion, her commitment to fostering creativity in the heart of the town. But now the atmosphere felt heavy, thick with whispers, judgment, and the weight of her own mistakes. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to cloud her every thought. She avoided eye contact with the crowd gathered outside, their faces a blur of curiosity and scrutiny. Just a week prior, she had been the proud owner of a small but thriving art space where families painted, laughed, and connected, but everything had changed in an instant. A technical error, one small oversight, had unleashed a wave of chaos that swept through her community like a storm. Confidential information had leaked, and suddenly she was the talk of the town, the subject of gossip and scorn. "Lily," shouted a voice, sharp and demanding, slicing through the sea of murmurs. She squeezed her eyes shut for a brief moment, willing herself to turn back to find refuge within those familiar walls, but she knew she couldn't hide. Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and stepped forward, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes boring into her. The reporters had arrived. Another reporter pressed, his camera trained directly on her face, capturing the raw emotion that churned inside her. Her voice trembled, but she pushed through it. "I take full responsibility for what happened." As she spoke, the crowd shifted, a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Some people leaned in closer, eager to hear more. Others crossed their arms, doubt etched across their faces. Every beat of her heart matched the tension vibrating in the air, a reminder of how quickly her world had spiraled out of control. Came the sharp question that felt like another blow. "No," she replied, finding strength amidst her fear. "I'm here to fix this." The words surprised her, spilling out with a level of conviction she hadn't anticipated. As her eyes scanned the crowd, she caught a glimpse of her regular patrons' familiar faces filled with empathy and concern. Slowly, her resolve began to strengthen. Maybe they were here to understand, not just to judge. A different reporter interrupted, codependency evident in the anxious energy of the crowd. "I want to hold a community meeting," she declared, her voice growing steadier with each word. "I want to apologize to everyone affected, and I need to listen to their concerns." The reporters leaned in closer, their pens hovering over notepads, captivated by her honesty. She could feel their curiosity shift. They were no longer just hunting for scandal, they wanted to connect with her story. And wow, what a powerful realization that was. Someone asked, skepticism lacing their tone. Taking a deep breath, she considered, could her dream withstand this kind of rupture? For a brief instant, doubt washed over her, but then she remembered the laughter that had filled these walls, the joy of creation that blossomed in every corner. Yes, I believe it can. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. It felt like a new energy was building, a shared conviction that they could move forward. Maybe there was hope, maybe they could heal as one, shouted another reporter. That's something I have to earn, she said, her voice calm yet resolute. I understand how important trust is, and I'm prepared to face the consequences. As she continued to speak, Lily could feel the tension around her begin to melt away. This moment transcended the fear and despair that had become her life for the past week. Standing there, facing the very people who had once been her support system, she felt a spark of resilience ignite within her. Another voice interjected, wanting clarity, wanting more. I wasn't, she replied honestly. I didn't realize the extent of the error until it was too late, and by then it had affected so many people. The confession hung in the air, laced with the weight of regret, but alongside it, a sense of liberation surged within her. By admitting her mistakes, she opened a door to honesty, even if that meant standing exposed in front of her community. Asked a persistent voice, hope mingling with expectation. I can assure you that I will do everything in my power to ensure it doesn't, Lily replied, her heart racing. I've begun implementing new protocols, and I will be asking for input from everyone affected. The crowd murmured, the energy shifted. Instead of facing hostility and blame, her vulnerability transformed the atmosphere around her. She felt the warmth of support beginning to seep through the cracks of her fear. As the last questions were asked, Lily took a moment to reflect. The eyes that had once felt critical now held a bit of compassion, possibly even understanding. It felt like she had taken a step toward reclaiming her narrative, no longer a victim of circumstance, but a woman ready to face the complexities of her mistakes with courage. Thank you for listening, she said, and the weight of her gratitude hung heavily in the air. The reporters stepped back, cameras lowering, a shift in their demeanor suggesting they understood the gravity of the moment. Incredible, Lily thought. No longer was this just a story about scandal. It was about resilience, transformation, and the strength of community. After the crowd dispersed, the echoes of their conversations faded, leaving behind a gentle hum of hope. As she stepped back into the shelter of the community center, surrounded by art supplies and canvases, she felt the walls alive with potential, ready for something new to sprout. Days turned into weeks. The community meeting she had promised went off without a hitch, filled with honest conversations, heartfelt apologies, and shared laughter. Lily had reached out to every single client, each conversation a step toward mending the wounds inflicted by her mistake. People expressed their sorrow, but also their willingness to move forward. The atmosphere felt different now, woven with threads of understanding. Everyone was learning together how to transform hurt into creativity. As more workshops filled the community space, laughter and joy began to resurface. The colors of the walls brightened with each brushstroke of hope and resilience painted by all who entered. They transformed anxiety into joy, rebuilding trust and connections that had been shaken but not shattered. Months passed and the scars of the past began to fade, replaced by the vibrant pulse of community life. Each class wasn't just filled with people learning art, it transformed into a symphony of shared experiences. One evening, as she watched two students deep in conversation, sharing stories and techniques, she couldn't help but smile. The room was alive again. It was during one such evening that she received a message that made her heart swell. A client who had once expressed deep disappointment reached out to share how the workshops had helped him cope with his own struggles. He thanked her personally for giving everyone a safe space to express themselves without fear or judgment. Tears welled in her eyes as she read the words. This was why she started, why she had fought to fix what had been broken. Lily understood in that moment the power of community. She was no longer just a leader, she was also a participant in their collective healing. The day she had once dreaded, when those reporters had surrounded her at the entrance, now stood as a cornerstone of her journey. The fear and shame were nothing more than dark shadows that had led her into the light. It was a reminder of how far she had come. As she wiped away her tears, she took a moment to appreciate the beauty in vulnerability, a force that can cultivate strength rather than weakness. She had faced her fears, taken responsibility, and woven together a tapestry of resilience that had bound the community closer. Now she stood confidently before her canvases, ready to paint her next masterpiece, a masterpiece that would encompass the struggles, triumphs, and growth of the past months. She understood now that there would always be risks, but they were an integral part of the creative process. In the quiet evenings and chaotic afternoons, she found power and joy in her work, enriching her and everyone around her. The center had transformed not just into a hub of creativity, it became a sanctuary of healing and growth. So when the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the community center, Lily felt a peace settle within her. She had faced her storm and emerged strong. She wasn't merely an artist anymore, she was also a storyteller, capturing the essence of life's complexities on each canvas she touched. With the brush in hand, she was ready to paint, to create, and to embrace whatever came next. The world may turn tumultuous, but she knew she could stand tall, eyes wide open and heart full, ready to face the journey ahead. Lily stood by the door of the community center, the world outside seeming to swirl in chaos. Just a week ago, she had felt invincible, her small art studio blooming with life and laughter. Today, however, that vibrant atmosphere felt frayed and fragile, like a cherished painting left out in the rain. As she glanced outside, the scene was almost surreal. A horde of reporters surrounded the entrance, their cameras flashing like stars in a dark sky, capturing every moment as if it were spectacle. She could hear the murmurs, a mix of curiosity and intrigue, rising like a tide ready to crash. She avoided eye contact, fearful of what their gazes might hold. This was not how it was supposed to be. She had broken ground on a flourishing space for creativity, art classes, community gatherings, a safe haven where people could express themselves freely. Now, it felt like everything was crumbling because of a single mistake, a technical error in an email that had transformed her into the town's scandal. Confidential client information had morphed into headlines, and the whispers floated through the air like smoke, choking her every thought. A reporter angled for a better shot, calling Lily. Each question echoed in her ears, pushing her further down the path of despair. Fear gripped her, and for a moment she considered retreating back into the safety of the center. But she felt the weight of her choices, the reality that running away would only reinforce the narrative of shame that had taken hold. She had to face it, a reality she had tried to avoid like the sun escaping into a cloudy sky. Lily, another voice joined in, sharper this time, cutting through her uncertainty. Swallowing hard, she finally stepped forward, meeting the gaze of one of the reporters. There was no more hiding. This was her moment to reclaim the story. "I take full responsibility for my actions," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. The words fell into the cacophony, barely making an impact, and yet she felt a flicker of strength surge within her. Asked the persistent journalist, his microphone aimed at her like an arrow. In that moment, a plan began to form in her mind. "I'm going to hold a community meeting," she declared, the words tumbling out almost unexpectedly. She felt the crowd's energy shift. The whispers dulled as they leaned in, their curiosity piqued. Maybe there was hope yet, maybe they wanted to hear her truth not just for the sake of a story, but because they cared. "Lily," another voice chimed in, eager for more details. Taking a deep breath, she continued, "I will reach out to everyone affected. I owe them that." For a brief moment, silence fell over the gathering as her words hung in the air. People shared glances, exchanging expressions that reflected both skepticism and a glimmer of understanding. Perhaps they weren't just there to tear her down after all. Someone asked, their tone guarded. She hesitated, thinking of all the hard work she had dedicated over the years. "Yes, I believe it can," she said, her voice growing stronger. Just then, another reporter cut in sharply. "But you must know trust takes time." "Yes," Lily replied, feeling newfound determination course through her. Her heart raced as she spoke. Each word felt like a thread weaving a new narrative, one where she was not just the one being judged, but an active participant in her redemption. A sense of purpose began to solidify within her, as if she were shedding the weight of shame. Another voice asked, genuine concern threading through their question. "I'm sorry," she responded, each syllable heavy with sincerity. "I never wanted to hurt anybody. I want to listen, to understand their feelings, and to make changes." As the questions kept coming, she felt the adrenaline push her forward, transforming her fear into strength. The crowd was no longer just a sea of critics. They were individuals, each carrying their own story. She started to see flashes of hope in their faces, a mutual understanding slowly bridging the gap created by her mistake. Someone called out. "Yes," she affirmed, unwavering. "I will apologize, and I will hold that meeting to ensure we move forward together." Suddenly, something shifted in the air, a collective sigh of release as curiosity began mixing with compassion. The crowd's energy was transforming, and for the first time, Lily felt like they were rooting for her rather than against her. "Thank you for your honesty," a reporter finally said, a smile creeping onto his face. "Yes," she answered confidently. "I believe in our community's ability to heal." The crowd began to disperse, soft murmurs replacing the aggressive inquiries. As the reporters packed their gear, she could feel the warmth of support from the people around her. She wasn't just a story anymore. She was a person, flawed but determined, reaching out for their understanding. Stepping back into the community center felt like entering a sanctuary, each brushstroke on the wall a reminder of why she had fought so hard to create this space. The weight of the world felt lighter, but the reality of her actions settled heavily on her heart. She had said it. She had chosen confrontation over avoidance, honesty over hiding. Days turned into a week. Lily worked hard to prepare for the community meeting. She reached out to all her clients, expressing her sincerest apologies and inviting them to share their thoughts in a safe environment. At night, she scribbled notes, trying to imagine the questions they'd ask. Would they come or would they stay away, too hurt to engage? The uncertainty loomed over her like a storm cloud, threatening to burst at any moment. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. As she set up the chairs in a circle, the room felt charged, alive with anticipation and trepidation. People slowly filtered in, familiar faces showing signs of weariness but also openness. She could see the tension in their shoulders, the uncertainty in their eyes. Lily took a deep breath, standing at the front of the room. A mix of emotions churned inside her: nervousness, hope, fear. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice wavering slightly. "I know this has been a challenging time for us all." He spoke. Someone raised their hand. A familiar face from her workshops, an older woman named Mrs. Thompson, leaned forward, her expression a blend of skepticism and sorrow. "How can we trust you again, Lily?" The room went silent, and all eyes turned to Lily, their vulnerability laid bare. It was a challenging question, one that cut deep. "I understand why you feel that way, and I wouldn't expect you to trust me right away," she replied earnestly. "It will take time, and I know that." Supportive murmurs followed, yet doubt lingered in the air. More clients spoke, sharing their worries and experiences, each story weaving into a tapestry of hurt and expectation. The conversations became a mixture of anger and understanding, a dialogue that started healing the cracks left by her actions. Through it all, Lily listened, her heart heavy with responsibility. This was what she needed to face, the truth behind her error. Every voice, every concern resonated with her soul, enhancing her resolve to make the right choices moving forward. And just when the atmosphere began to shift toward healing, the door swung open. A pair of newcomers stepped into. Reporters, not the familiar faces she had seen outside, but representatives of a national outlet. They were armed with cameras and microphones, ready to capture the aftermath of her confrontation. "Excuse me," one of them interrupted, their voice slicing through the room. Lily's heart sank. The moment of vulnerability seemed to evaporate, replaced by the harsh lens of public scrutiny. The clients turned to her, their faces filled with uncertainty. She stood there, caught off guard, the tension rising in the air sharper than ever. She began, but the words stuck in her throat. The reality of being thrust back into the limelight was overwhelming. This was the moment she had dreaded, clawing at her insides. Would her chance for honest reconciliation be overshadowed by the press, reopening wounds she had just begun to heal? The room bristled with anxiety. The reporters seemed oblivious to the turmoil they had just caused, eager to pull her back into the narrative of scandal and betrayal. All around her, she felt a heavy silence, a collective holding of breath as everyone waited on her response. Suddenly, the realization hit her like a tidal wave. She had a choice. Faced with that choice, Lily felt a surge of defiance rise within her. She wasn't just a subject of their story, she was a participant in her own narrative, and while the world watched, she would stand firm, not allowing them to overshadow her progress. She took a deep breath and spoke, this time with fire in her heart. "I will not be defined by this moment. I am not here to entertain speculation or sensationalism. I'm here to repair my community, and I will not distract from that. If you want to hear our stories, you're welcome to stay." With those words, she felt a shift in the crowd, a support blossoming as they rallied behind her. The reporters stood momentarily taken aback, their cameras capturing her strength. One of the clients stood up, joining her in solidarity. "This is our space, and we will not let you turn it into something ugly," he declared, his voice unwavering. A ripple of agreement spread through the room, each person standing a little taller alongside her. Reporters, once the giants looming over her, now felt like shadows, temporarily blocked by the light of shared resolve. But just as victory seemed within reach, the tension in the air shifted again. Outside, a group had gathered: curious neighbors, loyal patrons, and even those who had doubted her. They had come together, drawn by the stories that rippled out into the community and the support that had recently formed. Voices rose, unified and determined, demanding to be heard. "Lily, we are here for you." And at that moment, she knew this wasn't just a turning point for her. It could spread like wildfire, igniting a movement of accountability and unity among those who had previously felt so isolated. And so, with the weight of her journey behind her, Lily faced the reporters and the crowd. She was ready to forge ahead, to shape the story anew. Finally prepared to reclaim her narrative, she stepped into her power, fully accepting the challenge that lay ahead. But in the back of her mind lingered one question: would this fragile unity hold firm against the tidal wave of public scrutiny, or would it all come crumbling down? The tension hung thick in the air, and as she stared into the faces of those gathered, she felt the heartbeat of uncertainty echoing inside her chest. Just then the door slammed shut behind the reporters, and the world outside faded. She understood now that this was about more than just her. It was about the community itself, a tapestry of stories waiting to be woven together. The ultimate question remained: how would a single moment of courage alter the fabric of their lives forever? The next chapter awaited, glowing just beyond the horizon, and Lily was ready to navigate the storm, determined to emerge stronger than ever.